Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lana and I'm your host for today. Today, we are joined with Diego Irigoyen. He is the Education and Collection Coordinator at Raffma. Today, we also have our guest, Andrew Thompson. So, we have Andrew Thompson. He is a professor here at Cal State San Bernardino. He has his MFA degree in studio art and design from Cal State San Bernardino. And is involved with the Klotz Gallery, Gallery 1 and 1, and as well as the small gallery, the little gallery.
Little gallery, yeah.
Little gallery.
Co-founder. Yeah.
So thanks for joining us today, Andrew.
Thank
We're
you.
really excited today to talk a little bit about photography. That's kind of like your area of expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we look at the idea of photography, it wasn't always there in history. Before it was always like paintings, the portraits, and then somewhere I think it was in the 1800s is when photography was really brought about. So, what influence do you think that had in the art world?
It's crazy. Where do you want to start? First of all, we can't. We first need to acknowledge that photography rides on the wave of colonialism. Like you need to acknowledge that, like the ability to have chemicals like reliable and have it all shipped to you, and there's already like this colonial kind of mindset imbued in the birth of photography. The invention itself is not put on, but brought out by a number of you know bourgeois, wealthier people that have the time to toy with this stuff. Yeah. But once it gets rolling and you get the daguerreotype, the tablet and all this stuff, it becomes a invention that is comparable to the Gutenberg press or the dynamo and engine. It touches every asset, or not asset, but affects everything that our society is made of. And how it affects art, I'll start with the painting. That painting no longer had to represent reality, and you get impressionism, you get fauvism, you end up with abstract expressionism, and all of this kind of splinters away from the reflection of reality into a more conceptual, content based, material based, philosophic based art practice.
Right. And it's interesting, when photography was first brought about, I feel like a lot of people saw it as the end of painting, the end of art because it's being
Hmm.
replaced. But if anything, it was more of a liberation in a way because
Yeah.
now we're not tied to, doing, representative art. We're able to do kind of whatever we want now.
Absolutely. In digital, the cell phone's doing that for analog photography right now.
Hmm. Right. Um, so I think when the photography first came about, I feel like there was like the split between like photographer and an artist, and I feel like
Hmm.
that kind of carries on to today. And I feel like there's a lot of people see them as two separate entities because here you have someone who
Yeah.
works hours on this painting or the sculpture or whatever it is, and you have the photographer who's like click and then
Yeah.
like that. So what do you
Well,
think?
it's never that easy.
Right.
Just okay. So remember I mentioned Antoine Claudette, right?
Yeah.
Antoine Claudette in approximately 1855. He's one of the early guys. In the conversation with Talbot, like kind of coming after Talbot, improving on materials. He's one of the first guys to get on the early stereoscopic photographic trend, which still, look, I've got a camera just within reach that's stereoscopic. So this dips all the way back to 1855. So Claudette's one of the first people to like argue that photography is art, that photography should be considered and in the art conversation, and that photographers are artists. With that said, you need to kind of also look at photography, the invention of it, the technology as like an as if it were like apps or dot coms, like in the late 90s. Because the apps on your phone didn't exist 15 years ago. Postmate, Snapchat, all these things, like somebody had to have these ideas and they're all kind of rushing towards market to make money. You get Louis Daguerre and Nice for Niepce, who are like the two to kind of come out to market first with the Daguerre type, because somebody like squashed Hippolyte Bayard, and like, it gets, if you get into it, it's really kind of juicy, like backstabbing history, and it's pretty fascinating. But it's also, they weren't thinking about art like with asterisks. I mean, Louis Daguerre was a scenic painter. He did have a what do they call it, a diorama, which is kind of like
Mm.
pre-movies. So you
Right.
can see it's like you're still thinking about art, but we're also really thinking about commerce at the same time. So now that question, that divide, sorry to be so extensive on this, but that divide that you mentioned really gets squashed in the 70s.
Right.
um, because when the conceptual artists start to use the camera because it's cheap, it's easy, they bring it into the acceptable art narrative. And then by the time the early 80s hits, you have Richard Prince taking photograph, like re-photographing Marlboro ads, blowing them up huge. You get who's this other guy? I'm forgetting his name right now. I want to say Gerhard Richter, but it's not him. I mean, but even him, you know what I'm saying? Like, you start seeing this like constant merging of art and photography. And if you look at the auction houses today, you'll see that photography still dominates. Photography still dominates the art conversation, while vintage photography, black and white stuff, is kind of put into a corner for the most part.
Right. So you kind of mentioned that that shift happens into the 70s. In my head, I was thinking, what happened in the 70s? Do you think it has something to do with accessibility to cameras and kind of how that,
Definitely.
increased over the years?
I mean, accessibility in the camera is why it's so radically pervasive through um our society. Let's talk about the camera for a second. Like, not the cell phone, but just the idea of a camera is based on the camera obscura. If you go to the California Museum of Photography, if you haven't, they have one. That's the nearest one, but it's like a big room, little hole, and that projects whatever's outside onto your wall. Right? You can make your bedroom into a camera obscura. This is something that's been around for centuries. Now, you kind of put it into a box and make it so that somebody enters and they make paintings or sketches, and guess what you get? Perspective. You know what I'm saying? You get like all this Albrecht Dürer, you get all this like wonderful painting perspective. That's what they were using, this camera obscura tool. Now, as you start getting into they're making cameras now. Camera is just a camera obscura with a lens on it and a sensitive, light sensitive material in the back. So it goes from metal plate, to glass, to large glass, and it's all like hard chemicals, and you can catch things on fire. Everything's very difficult, right? Photography was not easy until the Brownie with George Eastman and the Kodak, the Kodak Brownie. Like, not unlike the Polaroid, you shoot 100 rolls. I'm pardon me, not 100 images on a roll. You take that and you mail it to Kodak in Rochester. They develop it, send you back your 100 pictures and your camera filled with more film. I'm teaching a class at Chafee. That's the same thing we're doing now. You know what I'm saying? Like shooting film and sending it out and having it come back. Same process. Um, Eastman gets help from other scientists, and they work out the silver emulsion on a clear gelatin, and now you have film. And from the late 1800s, early 1900s to 2021, you have light sensitive silver crystals on plastic, clear plastic film. So it's now cheaper to make, it's easier to use, it's everything's easier. You get the Polaroid, shake it like a Polaroid picture, and then you get the cell phone. And the cell phone camera breaks everything open. And now everybody has a camera. Everybody's a photographer. and we haven't even talked about science yet. Looking at the stars in the sky, looking at the retinas. You know, if you have eye damage, you know, looking at telescopic cameras that go into people's bodies. The lens and the camera touches everything. Photography touches everything. Warfare. We can talk about how photography affect warfare too. So yeah.
Wow. And you mentioned the development of the camera on the phone,
Mm,
and I think that that's something that really has influenced our society today.
yeah.
And I think even Diego can talk about this too, where everyone is kind of a photographer now. Like if you're photography, if you're just someone doing artwork in your room, or you like kind of like Diego likes taking pictures of your cats. It's
Hmm.
something that everyone can do.
Hmm.
So do you think that is almost in a way a handicap because you get to this point where it's so easy that we're kind of losing that sense of like analog, the science behind it because it's like a click and you have it.
Yes and no. Yeah, yeah. It's like a splinter though, because it's like, and you know, those who are in my Chafee class will know I'm constantly talking about the shortcuts that digital has brought us. Here's a one that I always rely on. I never use a light meter anymore. Unless I'm shooting film, I don't even why? Because I shoot it. Oh, it's too bright. Delete that. Shoot it. Oh, it's too dark. Delete that. Shoot it. Oh, perfect. It just kills the light meter. But suited I'm shooting film, I don't know. Right. So you have to be really much more precise when shooting film. And I always make the argument that when you're shooting film, it will make you a better digital photographer. Now, this is for people that are like actually interested in going like this, click, right? But if you just dude, I don't care. You know, you have your cell phone, you put on your filters and whatever else that's kind of like pre-made for you. I often make fun of it as if it's like choose your own adventure. You're not really thinking for yourself. You're just kind of like rolling through like a closet full of predestined ideas and just kind of choose one, like a record, put it on the plate. Um, but and I feel like not enough people think about this, but it really just look at Instagram now with the AI, not AI, but the augmented reality like filters that have been popping up. Spark, that app that's free from Facebook. You can create your own AI stuff. Not AI. I'm just keep using that wrong, but AR, augmented reality. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's super wild and super forward thinking. And I constantly throw up the flag. We need to be aware of deep fakes because that's that's the frontier of both fear and art.
Right. So you kind of mentioned social media too.
Yeah,
I feel like everyone has an Instagram or everyone has a Snapchat. I feel like
yeah,
we're all becoming photographers in our own right
and influencers.
and influencers. Yes. So do you think that I feel like a lot of people, maybe like if you're, I don't want to say elitist, but a lot of people will look negatively upon that because
Mhm.
oh now everyone is a phone photographer, everyone is doing this. Do you think that there's a saturation now of photographers, or do you think that it's this blooming thing now?
A bit of both. I mean, it's definitely an oversaturation. There's an oversaturation of everything. There's an oversaturation of MFAs. You know what I'm saying? There's an oversaturation of PhDs. It's like there's more than what's available, right? That's just kind of not our future, our current.
Mhm.
And it's going to get worse as the climate changes and et cetera, et cetera. This oversaturation. That's it. So in that point, hey, forget it. Like it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You just have to kind of. This is where I kind of load into like just like be comfortable with what you make, trust yourself, trust your process, put your head down and just grind. And those who appreciate and find it will find it. Everything else you can't control. Just make art.
Mhm.
That's the only thing. Um, is it a good thing? The blooming? Yeah. I mean, yes, it is because like think about this. Imagine people that don't know what their family looks like. their parents, the grandparents, the great grandparents. Many of us can because of the camera, right? Because of the accessibility to getting your likeness recorded for history. If you go back far enough, or if you take certain groups of people that don't have that privilege, what I'm saying, you have like this gap in history now, or personal history. Now, when you have this, it's dope. You got everything. Boop, boop, boop. Cheese. Do all the poses and whatnot. And it's weird though because now it's all on a server somewhere. Probably out in like the outskirts of Reno in some like massive data farm where it's just like temperature controlled computers for miles on end. And that's our weird reality. That's where your personal history is saved. And that's really weird to me, but it's also at least more people get to see what their regular life looks like, show what their regular lives look like, be able to comment, like, yo, you hear the news coming this way, but this is what we see from the ground. All this stuff is really fantastic. So there's no cut and dry answer.
There's
Right.
something really interesting there as far as like an art that is controlling the masses. Have we ever had an art prior to photography that can influence and be accessed by the masses in such a commercial,
Literature,
a casual way?
literature.
But even there are barriers to literature,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
you have to teach a baby to read, but the
Read
baby will
exactly.
learn how to use the camera just by watching you.
That's for sure. And this is why, like, again, I'm photography has infiltrated our own psyche too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know, oh my God, it sounds so crazy, but you don't. This is a rhetorical question, so don't answer me. But what does your Tinder profile look like? What does your Grinder profile look like? You know what I mean? Like that right there is like, you got to do like the pose, you got to do like the duck lip, suck it in. Why? So that you look more handsome or more beautiful or more like the models, more like what you see um, presented as traditional good looks, right? And we don't even have to know that it's happening to us as it happens to us. You know what I'm saying? Because, like you said, you just consume it visually. You take in all these like four-dimensional signs. It's like semiotics. It's like time, place, and duration. Um, God damn, it's really insidious and kind of fascinating to me, which is another reason why I love it. I love I mean, not because it's so insidious, but for me, you know, as my artistic journey started from the beginning up until now, I just kept reinvesting in photography, right? Just like putting all my effort, all my money into this is what I'm doing, right? And as I dig into it, as I like read Fleissur or Francois Laruelle or other people that are like philosophers, not photographers, that are coming at photography, and then it's like, oh damn, this is really much more a prevalent of an art medium than painting was, than drawing was, video, film, propaganda film. You know what I'm saying? Like commercials, television commercials. That's probably a more persuasive art form that it infiltrates our psyche more than just like the single photograph.
It's interesting because when photography came about, painting was forced to evolve.
Yeah,
And it seemed like photography did it to itself as it became this. And I'm thinking more in the fine art realm, like what are fine artists who are photographers doing now? They don't look like, I'm thinking of your work too, Andrew. It
yeah,
doesn't look like a photograph at first glance, right? You might
yeah,
have to do some investigation to realize, oh, this is related to
yeah,
photography. And it's kind of forced the fine art photography world to evolve and change to the point where you might not recognize it as a
yeah.
photograph.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right. And this is the effect of the iPhone of well, not just the iPhone, but like the self camera cell phone. Um because look, um I started doing this maybe 15, 17 years ago in early 91, 92, where I noticed like digital is going to just kind of like clear the table, and of physical objects, of the physicality of the image, right? The image slides from away from the material, and the current material is digital. It's the ones and zeros, right, on a bit. Um, and this is why I started initially putting pictures on canvas, then sewing, then ripping and sewing and tearing, and then like eventually like getting back onto like photo paper and being like, no, we are talking about how the medium, how this material that's kind of left over, kind of in a junk pile right now, can still be reassembled into something that still speaks, I think, with power, right? And points to even larger issues through the use or the misuse of the material. And I've noticed, not noticed, I mean, it's been clear as I continue to reinvest. I find other artists like myself, Paula Riff, who just died, art rest in peace, one of my favorites and like a friend of mine. Um, Ross Sonnenberg, who's in Long Beach. He's like, dude, this dude. So you know that I'm doing a lot of work in my garage, right? He's the guy who showed me how to work in your garage. He's like the king of garage style. Like he walks in, throws in a red bulb, and just starts lighting off firecrackers in his garage, and it's like filled with stuff. It's just like, what the awesome. Awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to see photographs that are like pushing boundaries, right? It's so boring to me. Not boring. How about this? I hate television commercials. I hate advertisements. And I'm sorry. I don't mean to be like, I know that these people need to make money, right? The people who make them and the people who have advertisements made to be sold on a television show, so the television show can get, I get it, but I still find it. I guess because I have like sensory issues. I don't know, but I find it like harpoons me straight into the brain, and just like digs inside my skull to the point where it's like, gosh, I still remember Where's the Beef. Can I forget that? I don't want that in my head anymore. You know what I mean? Like, so. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm gonna stop, but it gets deep, right? Like you have to change, and there are other people that have started going back to using or misusing the material to reconsider how, or they use the term expanded photography or process photography, And look, I got some people right off the top. Like, here's two of my favorites. Betty Hahn, first to be sewing on gum bichromates, 1972, the year I was born, nearly 50 years ago. Thomas Barrow, you know, from New Mexico, doing scratch negatives. Um, um, Look, you're gonna laugh at this one, Diego, because like, let me just be clear. I have been making a ton of work without ever seeing these pictures. And then I see somebody's like,
Is he using silicone?
yeah, it's all like, it's black and white paper that's ripped up and then used with like caulk
Yeah.
to reattach. And then there's like spray paint on the like the bottom that's pink, and on the what are they called? The fault lines where the caulk is yellow. I was like, dude, awesome. Both awesome because like I have heroes to look back at, right? That I'm not just like out in the wilderness like some crazy guy melting cameras. Um, there's somebody to look at, but it's also this kind of reinvestigating the material is constantly growing. I mean, look at the London Alternative uh, Photo Gallery, I think. I forget exactly their tagline right now, but these guys are doing all environmentally friendly, making developers out of seaweed or agar. It's like awesome. Awesome. Let the digital people do their little doodad stuff, like grab some filters, great. That's great. Great. Have fun. I want to know about deep fakes, AR, VR, or the other stuff where it's just like how do you rework the materials. I don't know, I'm an extremist that way.
Right. And I feel like there's this recurring theme of, using materials or, going digital. And I feel like you mentioned, in the 90s is when that digital kind of took off. And, in a lot of ways, photography relates to consumerism as well. So I think in the
Definitely.
world today, we see, there's this peak in consumerism. And I feel like there's almost a movement of turning away from consumerism and going back to, trying to find, locally sourced, handmade kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You see similar trends with photography where it's like we were all going digital. Now we're like, okay, let's take a step back and go back
Yeah.
again. You
Yeah.
see that movement?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember like online meme maybe 10 years ago where the song would like um not appropriate, but the catch was like we're having new age fun with a vintage feel, and it's like putting on like a Polaroid filter on your like your cell phone, and it's like I feel like such an old person on the lawn, like ugh, you kids, you're doing it wrong. But at the same time, they don't know any different. And I want to go back to kind of like why everybody's not everybody, but why there's so many like process photographers or material based photographers is that this invention was not made by artists or for artists. This is made commerce based, just like the initial invention. So it's a weird, wonderfully weird medium because it's part science, it's part art, it's total alchemy. I don't believe that it's magic. I believe that it's alchemy. There's a difference. Magic is an illusion. Alchemy is a transformation of something. Um, and it's both commercial, like very, very commerce based, as well as very aesthetic based. And it's fascinating because you also can't tell what people you can't tell other people that their opinions are wrong, right? Somebody might say, I like Peter Lick, best photographer ever. I'll be like, not in my view. But at the same time, he makes millions of dollars. What am I going to say? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you view this, right? Like, you know,
As a medium, I think it's evolved in a way that is more interesting than any other medium that existed prior to it.
yeah,
Where you have something that's so technical and almost in a way, like if you could look at it as a craft almost,
yeah,
right? Like, because
definitely
it's so
craft.
technical,
Absolutely. Yeah,
where rather than like perfecting that craft, now it's like interested in the process of the craft and deconstructing and finding new ways to reach an end goal
yeah,
that wasn't previously thought of. So
yeah.
there's no other craft that has evolved in that way. It's always towards the perfection of that craft.
I would take a little bit of umbrage in the sense that if you look at like painting, Picasso's early collages with the ropes and abstract expressionism, Morris Lewis, one of my favorites, like seeping the paint into the canvas, right? It's like now it's part of the so philosophic, so beautiful. Um, so you get that, but here's the thing. So I broke my arm recently, right? X-rays, cameras. You've got X-ray technicians that don't even think about art, and they use the camera, they use the process daily. And you get the doctors. They never think about this. If I said blueprints, what would you think?
Architecture.
Architecture. You know what that medium is? What that process? It's a cyanotype. Photographers call it cyanotypes. Architects call it blueprints. It's the same thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's like painting doesn't have like you're not going to paint an X-ray of
Yeah.
my broken arm.
Yeah.
And that, to your point, yes, but I would argue that painting has been deconstructed or expanded or picked apart countlessly like a zombie.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, it just doesn't have that functional aspect to it.
Yeah,
And in my head, when I said craft, I was thinking more of like woodworking or
yeah,
the things that have a practical function at the end. And
yeah,
like what you were talking about earlier, photography is really that documentary practicality, right?
yeah.
Like so you can remember what your family looks like, which
It
is
is definitely a craft. It's something that I get a lot of flack for from my peers because I don't craft well in photography anymore. Um, one of my favorite jokes, my not jokes, but like favorite question, my friend Alejandro Sanchez, who everybody should know as a photographer, excellent person, always with the good hard questions. He says to me, I teach with him at Chafee, and when he says to me, Andrew, when are you going to start making good pictures? It's been years. I still think about that. I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to start making good pictures. I don't think I'm going to start making good pictures again. Um, and I said to him, like, Alejandro, look at what I've done for Safeway, or when I photograph for Gotchchalks, or like Oshkosh Bagosh, all this like catalog stuff. And I was photographing. I just finished working at Martin Lawrence Gallery, where I was photographing Picasso's, Warhol's, Erte sculptures, all this stuff. Boom, like
some
an,
of our pots have been photographed by you.
oh, dude, like a champ. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and
Yeah.
and the minute I photographed like a 3 foot tall like mirrored urn, I was like, nobody's telling me what to do with my camera anymore. Like, I get this. I can talk tech daily, but you know what I don't want to do? God, don't make my art a chore. You know, I want my art. I want my place. Why I'm so messy and why I'm like doing weird things. It's like I want to play. I want to go to that and go into my dark room and go, I wonder what I'm going to get today. That's why the melting cameras are so fascinating to me. I really get a kick that so many people are like, what the hell are you doing? I get a kick from that because it's like, okay, I get it. Maybe it's not like a good idea in terms of like much success or like financial success, but you know what it is? It's my wholly original idea. The only other person that was melting cameras is Bill J. I just found out about him. And this guy is, I mean, I found out about 3 or 4 months ago after I've been doing the project. But he'd take like nice plastic cameras and he would torch them in a barbecue pit. Oh, my man, and he wrote a lot. He's like one of these really influential authors on photography. So I was like, oh my god, new hero to worship. But he never did what I do, and what I'm doing is pulled from learning about the caffeinol process from friends of mine in Europe, and going like, and then some like random like, I wonder if chemistry freezes. Like, I don't know where that came from. It's just like one day I was like, oh, I got some extra developer. I got a ice tray that I would never use, and I was house sitting in a house that was pretty dirty, and I wasn't allowed to clean it up because like they were gonna sell it. It's like in transition, right? They're like, fuck it. Oh, sorry. I was like, forget it. I'll just like boop boop, put it in, pulled it out, didn't freeze. But I put that little slush onto a piece of paper, went to work, came back. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then one day I was at Cal State eating lunch, and I looked at this old camera and like a flash, like a vision, inspiration. I had this vision of like the camera just kind of dissolving. And I said, how am I going to make that happen? Right. And from there, it's just like, do, 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 just trusting my process, trusting my gut instinct, and not being afraid to fail, not being afraid to do stupid things. It's like, um I don't know the exact Warhol quote, but it's like, you make art, let other people worry if it's art or not, and while they're deciding, make more art.
Wow.
So, one of my favorite teachers, who was an ex-roommate of mine, Justin Horn, I want to put that out. What great painter, always like sharp vision. And he says to me, Andrew, you can't be afraid to make bad art. And I took that to heart, you know. And sometimes I challenge my students, try to make bad art. Just try. You'd be surprised how hard it is to make bad art, you know? And usually I can go on. I think Peter Lick is bad art, but that's me. Um, um, but I also think that sometimes those mistakes is your breakthrough into your next journey.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're just about ready to wrap up, but I do have one last question before we transition to Q&A. And I guess it's kind of like a scenario, I guess. So let's say like you're in a gallery space or wherever you are, and then someone comes up to you and you're like, and they say to you, photography is an art. I don't understand it. It's just, people who are hired, they dress in all black and attend weddings and, event photographer. That's all it is. What's your response to that?
First of all, I'm disappointed by how cynical that person is. That question is, right? Like, it's just that easy. You know what? I'm going to go to your job and just say, oh, it's all you're doing is answering emails. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, dude, there's a lot of decision making happening. Um, it would depend on my mood and how comfortable I was with that person. If I was really comfortable with them, I'd laugh at them and kind of verbal jujitsu them into submission. Um, if they were genuinely curious, but just kind of like out of touch, I would use the hop keto and just kind of like gently use their questioning to bring them to their own understanding. Because look, wedding photographers, guess what? Shooting weddings is hard, really hard, and I hate it. I will never do a wedding. Don't call me. I don't even want to go to your wedding. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, and weddings have nothing to do with photography. You need to be in tune with your camera before you even offer to photograph a wedding, because the real thing about it is psychology with pressure. You're dealing with, of course, there's the stereotype of bridezilla, but even the person that's not bridezilla has tons of insecurities and pressure because it's got to be the best day ever, and then you got like the mother leaning over your ear, or the father, getting drunk and slapping you on the back. It's like, it's terrible. Any photographer that does weddings and does weddings really well, like with artistic vision, I want to say high five, top 10. You know what I'm saying? Like, go get it. I support you as an artist, because I'm not going to do it. It's much harder. And even that wedding photographer is an artist.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and start Q&A. So anyone here who's tuning in, if you have any questions for Andrew or for Diego and I, please just go ahead and drop those into the chat and we will get to them once we see them. So we're going to go ahead and start with a pre-submitted question that we have. And so this is in regard to a movie that recently came out. It's called The Dino, The City in Focus.
Yeah.
It kind of talks about, kind of the situation that's happening in San Bernardino, what's been happening for the last few decades and how it's kind of, hit a down point in its history and how there's this new photography scene that's kind of, rising up, trying to revive it. So, what are your thoughts on that? Kind of what's going on in San Bernardino?
Yeah, for sure. Before I get into this, and I'm going to get into it, I want to shout out Sophia Allison, who I see is on the chat. A favorite of mine as an artist and an inspiration as somebody in the art world. So, hi, Sophia. Thank you for joining. The Dino. Everybody should watch the Dino, A City in Focus on Amazon. Amazon
Yeah.
Prime. Yeah, I did not know anything about this. I had inklings of the talent in San Bernardino photography, just kind of like as they run through my classes. I've been like, wow, okay, wow, these are really good, right? And then the Dino, you know, happening. I didn't even know about it until I watched it. I was like, oh damn. I had met the Dirtbag. Dirtbag and I, we befriended the Dirtbag. I'm a big fan of IE Diaries. I'm a big fan of West Side Story. These there is a ton of great photographers here in San Bernardino. It's kind of bananas, like how much good photographers there are here, and it's like nobody sees them because everyone thinks Los Angeles is the brightest star in Southern California. And sure, maybe it's the most funded county, but I'm constantly amazed by how good and how like the quality of photographs coming out of San Bernardino photographers. Yeah, it's really astounding, and I feel like totally alien to it because it's like a different style than I'm doing. But I'm a fan of art. I'm a fan of artists. I'm a fan of supporting artists. Diego knows this. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm just stoked, and I think that everybody should know about it. Everybody that's like, whether you're Cal State San Bernardino Valley College, Chaffey College, Crafton, everybody in the area like should know about this because we we're poorly underfunded as an art in the county, and we're poorly overlooked for the talent that's here. It's banana. Fred Bashir. I said it's banana, but it's bananas. I wanted to mention Fred Bashir, another artist who graduated from Cal State San Bernardino. I love this guy's work. It's like I'm just so happy to see inspiring work. I don't even have to leave the county. It's fantastic.
Awesome. I love that you mentioned Fred because he is going to
Oh,
be.
you know Fred?
Yes, we had him last season on as a guest, and we will have him again later
Awesome.
in April. But that kind of wraps up for today. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. Thank you, Diego, for helping out. So if you guys are interested in any events, we mentioned, we're going to have more podcasts coming soon. Please do check out the links that Miranda dropped in the chat earlier. We will have our next podcast on March 11th, where we'll be talking to Diego Robles about some of the philosophy of arts and how it ties to time and multiculturalism. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.